Strengthening dialogue on work-related issues between employers and workers is part of the ILO's objective. A dialogue with a tripartite structure involving employers, workers' representatives and the government is seen as the best way to find compromise to labour disputes that would result in a win-win solution. Ideally, this would be done in a peaceful manner. However, the reality is not that easy. Negotiations could well end up being done not in a room, but on the streets, thus disturbing traffic and the rest of the society.
Normally, when workers demand, it's higher pay, higher wage, or fair wage, and so on and so on. And that is often not, in the same way that, say, employers see what is a proper wage and so on and so forth. What is the sort of the sweet spot? Again, this is where the employers are happy that they're paying a good wage, and then the employees are happy for getting a good wage. And what's in your experience is the formula? Well,
obviously, nobody should be surprised if the workers think the wages should be a bit higher and the employer thinks they should be a bit lower. I mean, there's no surprise in that. That's the world. That's how it is. But where is that sweet spot? Where is the sort of the natural centre of gravity? Well, I think there's a straightforward answer to that. In the end, wages can only go up in line with productivity. You cannot receive more if you don't make more. In the longer term, you can always get a short-term win, or you can lose something in the short term. But in the longer term, it's productivity that governs the behaviour of real wages. And again, that's why I come back to the importance of education, of skills, because that's how productivity will increase, and that in the end is how real wages are going to go up. So that is the secret, that is the trick, to make sure that you're able to link wage increases with productivity increases. It means companies can be successful, and it means that workers can get their share of the benefits of the success.
There's no point increasing the wage and then the factory goes bankrupt because nobody can afford it.
And it just won't work.
Okay, but Mr. Ryder, what's the ILO's role when it comes to this situation? I mean, do you take sides? I mean, I know you're from the trade union background.
We are strictly not taking sides. It's important. We have a multiple role. In Indonesia, we have a series of programs and projects amounting to $20 million. We have a portfolio of activities, very varied, from microcredit to the rural sector, sustainability in the rural sector, to this Better Work project here at this garment factory. But I see our role really in three areas: giving policy advice to the government. The government is looking for solutions to problems that many countries face. But we can give advice, and particularly we can share knowledge. The ILO has 185 member countries. Many of them have tackled the same problems or similar problems. We can bring that experience to Indonesia. Indonesia can learn from it, and by the way, we can learn from Indonesia as well. And another role which I think is extremely important is capacity building. That is to make trade unions, employers, and indeed the government more knowledgeable about the problems they have to deal with and increase their capacity to find the right solutions. So that's the in-country role. I want to just say as well, Indonesia has become an international player. Last month I met the President of Indonesia at the G20 Leaders Summit in Brisbane in Australia. And this is another area. We are working internationally to put this decent work objective at the top of the international policy agenda. The very first sentence of the G20 Leaders communique, it's 5 pages long, but the first sentence says, our highest priority is to promote economic growth, to provide quality jobs for our people. So I think our message is getting through.
Yeah, and also in Indonesia we have what we call a demographic bonus, although it's not going to be a bonus if the workers are not productive, they're not competitive. And the other thing is poverty is still very much a problem here in Indonesia. Over 60% of our workers are in the informal sector. And the other thing is migrant workers. I mean, migrant workers are something that, ideally we want to send more high-skilled workers because they're exposed and vulnerable to all sorts of abuses. And child trafficking. I mean, these are issues that Indonesia faces. How do you see Indonesia tackling with these?
Well, we've talked a lot in these last 3 days about these issues. I would say at the darkest end of the labour market, where abuse, I'm afraid, still occurs. On the question of migration, this is a matter we've discussed with the Minister of Manpower, also with the Vice President. Indonesia is quite right to say that we are not happy, we are not content with the conditions and treatment that so many Indonesian people get when they go to work in other countries. And of course the focus is very much on women, low-skilled women who particularly go to work as domestic employees, particularly in the Gulf region. And there is a massive problem. There is no doubt there is a massive problem. The ILO has made fair migration systems one of our priorities for the future, because we recognize that there are 231 million migrant workers in the world today. Unfortunately, many of them are subject to really very bad treatment. Now, we have to work at this. We have to get the destination countries to accept that they have responsibilities. We have a saying in the ILO that labour is not a commodity. So you don't send an Indonesian worker like an export of a shirt made in this factory. These are people with rights, these are human beings, and they need their rights to be respected, and they need their humanity also to be recognised. So I said very clearly to the Vice President yesterday, I want to work with Indonesia as a partner to make migration fair, to make it humane. Indonesia, of course, is thinking about stopping migration in certain areas, or has done so. Now, I can understand why they would wish to do that. Where the intolerable is the normal, you stop it. On the other hand, migration can be a very positive thing. I think in the long term, the right thing is to actually make migration acceptable, to make it fair, because it does bring benefits to both the sending and the receiving countries. On child labour, which is the other issue you have mentioned, I'm really very encouraged, and I congratulated the government on the fact that they have adopted this roadmap for Indonesia, which has as an objective, or the objective, to eliminate all child labour by 2022. Indonesia has been successful. Indonesia, over the last 20 years, has brought down its child labour nearly by 1/2. So it can be done. This is not something which is inevitable. It's not something which is just a normal part of life. You can bring it down if you bring the political will and the right policies to the job. And I really think that Indonesia, I was actually at a world conference against child labour last year in Brazil, and I was able to quote Indonesia as being one of the positive stories, one of the countries which has taken on the challenge of child labour and succeeded, or at least on the road to succeeding in its elimination.